Here's the speech that John Lewis gave this morning for a bunch of young men who had won scholarships to college.
Thank you so much for those kind words of introduction. Thank you, Congresswoman Wilson, for inviting a poor boy from Georgia who was born and reared in rural Alabama to come to the state of Florida, to the beautiful city of Miami. I'm delighted, very happy, and very pleased to be here. I prepared a speech, but I'm not going to use it. I've been deeply inspired by being here. Senator Rubio, thank you. Thank you for being here. Senator Nelson, to all of the honorable elected officials, the mayors, members of the school board, to all of the young people, the role models, the judges, the lawyers, the doctors, the teachers. Thank you for finding a way to get in the way. Thank you for standing up. Thank you for speaking up. Thank you for being role models for these beautiful, handsome young men. I feel more than lucky. I feel honored and blessed to serve in the House of Representatives, to serve in the Congress with your elected official, but to be in the presence of Senator Rubio and Senator Nelson and my good friend and sister, Congresswoman Wilson. Sometime on a Wednesday, I come without a red tie on, and she said, "John, where's your red tie?" I said, "I just didn't wear it today." She said, "I'm going to get you another red tie." So I have another red tie. Thank you. I will have one from now on. Thank you. Thank you for all that you do. Young men, I grew up very, very poor in rural Alabama, 50 miles from Montgomery, outside of a little town called Troy. My father was a sharecropper, a tenant farmer. But back in 1944, when I was 4 years old, and I do remember when I was 4, how many of you remember when you were 4? What happened to the rest of us? My father had saved $300, and a man sold him 110 acres of land. We still own this land today. On this farm, we raise a lot of cotton and corn, lots of peanuts. I don't eat too many peanuts today. Don't tell the people in Georgia where we raise a lot of peanuts. I ate so many peanuts when I was growing up, I just don't want to see no more peanuts. Sometime I would be out there working in the field, picking cotton, gathering peanuts, pulling corn. My mother would say, "Boy, you're falling behind. You need to catch up." And I would say, "This is hard work. This is hard work." And she would say, "Hard work never kill anybody." I said, "Well, it's about to kill me." So as a little child, when I was growing up, my mother made me what we call a book bag. We didn't have backpacks. We get up early in the morning, put my papers and books in my book bags, and hide under the front porch and wait for the school bus to come up the hill. And when I heard the school bus coming up, I would run out and get on the school bus and go off to school rather than to the field to work. Had a wonderful uncle, one of my mother's brothers, who told me to get an education. He inspired me. He went in the military and served and came back, finished college, and became a high school principal. He taught me. Had a wonderful teacher who told me in school, read, my child, read. And I tried to read everything. On the farm, it was my responsibility to take care for the chickens. Your congresswoman has heard me tell this story from time to time. I fell in love with raising chickens. I know some of you like chickens, right? We had eggs for breakfast, right? The eggs come from the chickens, right? But as a little boy, I fell in love with raising chickens. Any of you know anything about raising chickens? One young person there? Thank you, young brother. When the setting hen was set, I had to take the fresh eggs, mark them with a pencil, place them under the setting hen, and wait for 3 long weeks for the little chicks to hatch. Some of you smart young scholars are saying, now, John Lewis, why do you mark those fresh eggs with a pencil before you place them under the setting hen? Well, from time to time, another hen would get on that same nest, and there will be some more fresh eggs. You had to be able to tell the fresh eggs from the eggs that were already under the setting hen. So do you follow me? So when the little chicks were hatched, I would fool these setting hens. Sometimes I would cheat on these setting hens. And when I look back on it, it was not the right thing to do. It's not the moral thing to do. It's not the most loving thing to do. It's not the most nonviolent thing to do. But I was never quite able to save $18.98 and order the most inexpensive incubator from the Sizzle Buck store. Now, young man, you're not old enough to remember the Sizzle Buck store, or maybe the Sizzle Buck catalog. It's a heavy book. It's a thick book. Some people call it the wish book. I wish I had this. I wish I had that. So I just kept on wishing. But as a little child, about 8 or 9 years old, I wanted to be a minister. I wanted to preach the gospel. Santa Claus brought me a Bible, learned to read the Bible. So from time to time, with the help of my brothers and sisters and cousins, we would gather all of our chickens together in the chicken yard, like you're gathered here in this room. And the chickens would gather in the chicken yard, but my brothers and sisters and cousins would gather outside, but around the chicken yard, and I would start speaking or preaching to the chickens. And when I look back on it, some of the chickens would bow their heads, some of the chickens would shake their heads. They never quite said amen, but they tended to listen to me much better than some of my colleagues listen to me today in the Congress. Senator Rivera is an exception. Your Congresswoman Wilson is an exception. And I tell you, those chickens inspired me because they listen. Listen to your teachers. Listen to your mothers and fathers. And be the best you can be. When I finished high school in May of 1957, 17 years old, I wanted to go off to college. There was a little college 10 miles from my home called Troy State College, now known as Troy University. Submitted my application, my high school transcript. I never heard a word from the college. But long before 1957 and 1955, heard of Rosa Parks, heard of Martin Luther King Jr. 1957, I met Rosa Parks. So because I didn't hear from this school, I wrote a letter to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I didn't tell my mother, my father, any of my sisters or brothers, any of my teachers. I told Dr. King I needed his help. He invited me to come to Montgomery to meet with him. In the meantime, I had been accepted at a little college in Nashville, Tennessee, where I spent 6 years studying at American Baptist College and Fisk University. So after being in Nashville for about 3 weeks, matter of fact, an uncle of mine, before I went to Nashville, gave me a $100 bill gave me a Foot Locker, one of these big upright trunks, put my books, my clothing, everything except those chickens in that Foot Locker, and took a Greyhound bus to Nashville, Tennessee to study. I told one of my teachers that I've been in contact with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. His teacher knew Dr. King. They had studied together at Morehouse College in Atlanta. He informed Dr. King that I was there. Martin Luther King Jr. got back in church with me and suggested when I was home for spring break to come and see him. On Saturday morning in March of 1958, I boarded a bus, traveled from Troy to Montgomery, and a young lawyer, young African-American lawyer by the name of Fred Gray, who was a lawyer for Rosa Parks, for Dr. King in the Montgomery movement, met me at the Greyhound bus station and drove me to the First Baptist Church in downtown Montgomery, pastored by the Reverend Ralph Abernathy, and ushered me into the office of the church. I saw Martin Luther King Jr. and Reverend Ralph Abernathy standing behind a desk. And Dr. King said, "Well, you John Lewis? Are you the boy from Troy?" And I said, "Dr. King, I am John Robert Lewis." And he called me the boy from Troy. He told me, said, "John, if you attempt to continue your effort to enter Troy State, now known as Troy University, your parents could lose their land. Your home could be bombed or burned. Something could happen to you. But if you want to go, we will support you. Go back home and have a discussion with your mother and with your father." My mother was so afraid, my father was so afraid that they could lose the land. Home could be burned or bombed. So I continued to study in Nashville. And it was in Nashville, Tennessee, where Dr. King would come and speak. Rosa Parks would come and speak. Thurgood Marshall would come and speak at Fisk University, and others. And I got to know these individuals. And one day on Fisk University campus, Congresswoman Wilson was walking across the campus, and Dr. W. E. Du Bois was on the campus. And he said, "Hello, young man." And I said, "Hello, Dr. Du Bois." But being there inspired me to stand up, to speak up, and to speak out. With a group of students from O'Hara Medical College, from Fisk University, Tennessee State, from Vanderbilt and Peabody and Scarrett and American Baptist, we started studying the way of peace, studying the philosophy and the discipline of nonviolence. We started sitting in lunch counters and restaurants to desegregate those places, standing in at theaters. When I was growing up and you go downtown Troy or go to Montgomery to see a movie, all of us little black children had to go upstairs to the balcony. And all the little white children went downstairs to the first floor. So I kept asking my mother, my father, my grandparents, and great-grandparents, why? They kept saying, "That's the way it is. Don't get in the way, don't get in trouble." So in Nashville, yes, I did get in trouble. I stood up, I spoke up, I spoke out, and I got arrested. And I said to you now, when they told us in Nashville that we continue to sit in, we may get arrested. I didn't have much money, but I wanted to look clean if I were going to go to jail. I wanted to look what some young men call, I wanted to look fresh. I wanted to look sharp. So I went downtown to a used men's store and bought a suit, a used suit. A vest came with it. If you have an opportunity to come to Washington and visit my congressional office, in your office is a large photograph of me being arrested for the first time, and I did look fresh. I did look clean. I did look sharp. So, just think, a few short years ago, in the nation's capital, in Washington, D.C., black people and white people, people of color, couldn't be seated together on a bus leaving the nation capital to travel through Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi. We were on our way to New Orleans to test a decision of the United States Supreme Court. Along the way, we were beaten and jailed. This was May 1961. My seatmate on that trip was a young white gentleman. We arrived in a little town called Rock Hill, South Carolina, and tried to enter a so-white waiting room, a so-called white waiting room. A group from the Klan attacked us and left us lying in a pool of blood. Many years later, to be exact, in February '09, one of the men that beaten us came to my Capitol Hill office. He was in his 70s with his son in his 40s. And he said, "Mr. Lewis, I'm one of the people that beat you and your seatmate. I've been a member of the Klan." He said, "I want to apologize. Will you accept my apology? Will you forgive me?" And I said, "Sir, I accept your apology. I forgive you." His son started crying. He started crying. They hugged me. I hugged him back. And I started crying. It is the power of the way of peace, the way of love. As Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, hate is too heavy a burden to bear. And I said to you as young men, the future leaders of this state, the future leader of this nation, the future leader of the world, we must never ever hate. The way of love is a better way. The way of peace is a better way. So I said to you as role models, never give up, never give in, stand up, speak up. When you see something that is not right, not fair, not just, you have a moral obligation to do something, to say something, and not be quiet. Yeah, we have come a distance. We made a lot of progress as a nation and as a people, but we're not there yet. The scars and stains of racism are deeply embedded in American society. We must not be at peace with ourselves as a nation until we have the change that Dr. King dreamed of. If it hadn't been for Martin Luther King Jr., I don't know where I would be. I could still be down there in rural Alabama, maybe preaching to chickens. If it hadn't been for Martin Luther King Jr., I wouldn't be a member of the House of Representatives since 1987. If it hadn't been for Martin Luther King Jr., I don't know what would have happened to our nation. He freed us. He helped liberate us to make our nation a better place, to make our world a better place. When we were planning a march on Washington in 1963, there was a man by the name of A. Philip Randolph, a native of this state, born in Jacksonville, Florida, moved to New York City and became a champion of civil rights, human rights, and labor rights. And Mr. Randolph would say over and over again as we met, he would say, "Brethren, maybe our foremothers and our forefathers all came to this great land in different ships, but we all in the same boat now." Dr. King would put it another way. It doesn't matter whether we're black or white, whether we're Latino, Asian American or Native American, we're one people, we're one family, we all live in the same house, the American house, and we must look at it. So I said to you, as we pause and remember Martin Luther King Jr., you must do your best. Stay in school, study, read. One of the teachers told me, read my child, read my child. And I tried to read everything. When I was growing up, we were too poor to have a subscription to the local newspaper, but my grandfather had one, and each day he would pass it on to us. You're more than lucky. You're blessed. We hadn't heard of the internet. Facebook, what is that? We didn't have cellular telephone. We had party line, have to wait till someone else got off the line. So use the instrument, use the tool, use your education. Get to know other role models. Thank your teachers. When I see law enforcement individuals, police officers, I say thank you for your service. When I see the TSA representatives, I say thank you for your service. Because they wear uniform, they have on badges. It's hard to say to our teachers sometimes, thank you, when you see them on the street, see them in the store. They don't wear uniform. But say thank you to your teachers. Say thank you to your parents. Say thank you to people who are trying to help you. Let me close by saying, we all must become participants in the democratic process. When you get old enough to register to vote, go and register and vote. The vote is precious. It is almost sacred. It is the most powerful, non-violent instrument or tool that we have in a democratic society, and we must use it. Just think a few short years ago, especially here in the American South, he was trying to make it harder and difficult for people to register to vote. In my native state of Alabama and in places like Georgia, sometimes people are asked to count the number of bubbles in a bar of soap, to count the number of jelly beans in a jar. People in Selma, Alabama, and other parts of the South stood in what I call a unmovable line. There were high school principals, college professors, lawyers, and doctors were told they could not read or write well enough. The only time that someone could even attempt to register to vote in Selma, Alabama, was the first and third Mondays of each month. We had to change that. When I spoke at the March on Washington on August 28, 1963, I was 23 years old. Had all of my hair and a few pounds lighter. I said, one person, one vote. That day when the march was all over, President Kennedy invited us down to the White House. He stood in the door of the Oval Office greeting each one of us. He kept saying, you did a good job, you did a good job. And when he got to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., he said, you did a good job and you had a dream. That was my last time seeing the president. He was assassinated on November 22nd, 1963. But 18 days after the march on Washington, there was a terrible bombing of the church in Birmingham, where 4 little girls were killed on a Sunday morning. That inspired us more than anything else to go to Selma and intensify efforts. There were black lawyers and black doctors and black teachers They've been trying to register for many, many years. We would go down there, stand in line. The sheriff would push us, arrest us, take us to jail. We come back over and over again. We got the Civil Rights Act passed in 1964. President Johnson signed it into law. Dr. King met with him and said, Mr. President, we need a voting rights act. And the president said, I just signed a Civil Rights Act. We don't have the votes in the Congress to get a voting rights act passed. If you want it, make me do it. So we intensified our efforts in Selma. And on Sunday, March 7th, 1965, a group of us, about 600 of us, left the Brown Chapel AME Church to walk 50 miles from Selma to Montgomery, to dramatize to the nation and to the world that people of color wanted to register to vote. There were young children, young men and young women your age, walking with us. Older people, 75, 80, and 90, who've been waiting to register to vote. We were walking in a peaceful, orderly, non-violent fashion. I was wearing a backpack before it became fashionable to wear backpacks. In this backpack, I had 2 books. I thought we were going to be arrested and go to jail, so I wanted to have something to read while I was in jail. Had 1 apple and 1 orange. I wanted to have something to eat while I was in jail. Since I thought I would be in jail with my friends and colleagues, I wanted to be able to brush my teeth, so I had toothpaste and toothbrush. We get to the highest point on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, crossing the Alabama River. A young man from Dr. King organization walking beside me said, John, can you swim? I said, no. What about you, Jose? Jose William. He said, a little, John. I said, well, there's too much water down there. We're not going to jump. We're going forward. And we continued to walk. And we saw hundreds, members of the state troopers. And behind the state trooper was the sheriff posse. We came within the hearing distance of the state troopers. Man spoke up and said, I'm Major John Cloud of the Alabama State Troopers. This is an unlawful march. It will not be allowed to continue. I give you 3 minutes to disperse and return to your homes or to your church. Jose Williams said, Major, give us a moment to kneel and pray. He said, troopers advance. Troopers advance. I said, Major, may I have a word? He said, there will be no word. The troopers came toward us, beating us with bull's whips, nightsticks. Was hit in the head by a state trooper with a nightstick, the first one to be hit. Knocked down, my knees went from under me. I thought I saw death. I thought I was going down that bridge. I thought it was my last nonviolent protest. I made it back to the church. I don't know how I made it back. Thousands of people trying to get in the church, more than 2,000 outside trying to get in. And someone asked me to say something to the audience, and I stood up and said something like, I don't understand it. How President Johnson can send troops to Vietnam and cannot send troops to Selma, Alabama to protect people who only desires to register to vote. The next thing I knew, been admitted to a little hospital called the Good Samaritan Hospital, where a group of nuns took care of us. And if it hadn't been for those nuns, I don't know what would have happened to many of us. That was on a Sunday evening. Early that Monday morning, Martin Luther King Jr., someone I love and admired, was my hero, came to my bedside and said, John, don't worry. we would make it from Selma to Montgomery. He said, I'm calling on religious leaders to come to Selma. When on that Tuesday, March 9th, more than 1,000 ministers, rabbis, priests, and nuns came to Selma and walked across the bridge. Was still in the hospital. But a few days later, I was up and I went into federal court with Dr. King and Reverend Abernathy and Attorney Fred Gray. He testified before a federal judge, a young man by Frank M. Johnson, who had been appointed to the bench by President Eisenhower. This judge did the right thing. His home had to be guarded around the clock. The FBI had to guard the home of his mother in downtown Montgomery because they were threatened. He had the courage to stand up. So I said to you, young men, you must have courage. You must be bold. And never, ever give up when you know that you're right. Be brave. You've been trained to get a great and good education. People expect you to get out there. You can become lawyers, doctors, scientists. Maybe one day one of you will be a mayor, a city council person, a great teacher, a member of the House, member of the Senate, governor of the state, maybe president of the United States of America. Dream dreams and never ever give up on your dreams. I close by saying thank you. I wish you well. Just go for it. Just go for it. People all over this city, all over this state, all over this nation are pulling for you. Stay away from violence. As I said earlier, never hate. The way of love is a better way. Thank you very much.
Listening to Congressman John Lewis at a scholarship luncheon in Miami. Senator Marco.
Now, this is the man that Donald Trump insulted. This is a man that Donald Trump doesn't want to reach out to. I'm sorry, folks, but there are those of you that I have seen post comments that claim that John Lewis is resting on his laurels and he's living on his past. Well, guess what? I salute him for everything he's done, and there's not enough living on of his past, okay, that can be used up based on his past. So those of you who claim that he's living on his past, you tell me, what are you living on? What have you done that is in any way a decent, a minuscule comparison to the blood, sweat, and tears that this man has shed for us as a people and for this nation?